Poke the Bear is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Game Time app.
And welcome into Poke the Bear episode 296, presented by Prize Picks and Game Time Tickets. My name is Conor Ryan, and once again we are joined by the esteemed, the ever studious Ty Anderson from 98.5 The Sports Hub. Ty, how you doing?
Studious.
Yes.
I do have all my research numbers, I suppose. I'm doing all right. We're living in a world now where the Bruins have ended their losing streak. Not out of the woods, but it's 4 points, and so I think this team needs that, and so the show will not be as dour as it's been. I feel like as a result of what they've done this week.
I will say the vibes weren't great last week. I would say that it was justified considering how brutal the Bruins were over an extended stretch of losing 6 games in a row. As you said, they do bounce back. They do win 2 games in a row against the Florida Panthers and the Tampa Bay Lightning. The shot volume, the shots on goal, not great in those 2 games, but they still 4 points is 4 points. They clearly what this team needed was the power of friendship to right the ship after Brad Marsh and David Pastrnak.
Turn your DMs off, by the way, everybody.
Yes, exactly. Keep an eye out on those things. I would say beyond the power of friendship, though, Ty, which we can't underestimate. It is a driving factor in many championship runs, many great teams fueled by that, fueled by narratives involving rogue DMs flying out there, what have you. What have you thought about just the play on the ice these last 2 games? Are you encouraged by the 4 points, which I guess is rather obvious, but are you encouraged by the response, or are there still things you're looking at of like, that's good, but I don't know how sustainable that is?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing you can take away from the 2 games is that Jeremy Swayman looks like Jeremy Swayman. The one that you were happy to pay $8.25 million, or maybe not happy, but at least accepting of paying that man that much money. And I think that's the most important thing for this team. You look at this team, the way they're built, the holes they have, the roster they've built. The greatest X factor they have is their goaltender. If he can get going and he can be dominant, that masks a lot of their inefficiencies, their power play, their 5-on-5 scoring, the lack of punch there. Like, if he can play like that every game, which is going to be really hard, obviously, but if he can be a .925 kind of goaltender from here on out, like, they're going to be in good shape. It's going to allow them to skate by a lot of their issues, right? And win a lot of games that they should lose or that they were losing back in November, December, and the start of the new year. So if that can continue to surge, they're in a good spot. But, I think that the Tampa game, like, I don't know how you feel about it, but being there, watching that game, it didn't feel like they were straight up dominated like the way they were in Florida. It felt like that was they're out to a 4-0 lead, their foot's off the gas, and that's a scoring effect, score effect kind of shot total, not, wow, they were dominated, lucky to get out of there with 2 points. Like the Florida game, they were dominated. The Tampa game, I didn't feel that way, personally.
Yeah, no, I agree. Listen, I'll tell you what, Ty. I was just happy that we had a actual entertaining game because God help us. For the first 4 months of this year, there have been a lot of ho-hum, nothing to talk about games where, again, it's usually been the same flaws, same issues, same results. In fact, we had, Poitras gets called up, contributes right away, sets up Frederick's goal. You had Michael Callahan making his debut. Other players step up. Weatherspoon gets a goal. Peak, I think, had a really good game. Swayman continues to play well. I think that I'm just happy the fact that we had a somewhat entertaining game with multiple narratives. And it's maybe we took it for granted like in 2022-23 beyond the results of just that was a team that was so deep that every game felt like the new, it's the inverse of like they say you never want to be the main character on Twitter for the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every game for the Bruins that year was like there was the Bertuzzi game, there was the Foligno game, there was you had Pastrnak lighting the lamp the entire time, but you had other guys step up, and I think you look at how the Bruins did respond in that game, and I agree with you, it wasn't as lopsided as that Panthers game where they were just repeatedly getting punched in the face and then just threw an uppercut and knocked Florida out. That's pretty much how that game went. I do think it is encouraging, though, as you said, of other guys stepping up, but most importantly, it's Swayman, right? And again, like you look at where he's been, I think he's got a 9.25 the last 8 games. The record's still 3-5 over that stretch, which means
Right.
that he's not getting the margin of error he's operating with is not great, right? Like you'd like to have the team supporting a little bit more, but if he's playing to that level, at the very least, you're going to one, steal some games, or two, you're going to be in these matchups, right? And if guys like Geeky can continue to come along, if a guy like Potra can add some spark further down the lineup, which he did on Tuesday, and especially David Pasternak's heating up. He's got 6 points in his last 2 games. I think you expand that even further. He's over a point per game the last 2+ weeks of the season. So, listen, this team is still pretty flawed. They're still short 1, 2 top 6 players probably, but if you have some guys that are slightly pulling on the rope, and most importantly, Swayman playing at a high level and Pastrnak going back to being a cheat code, as I give the thumbs up.
Thumbs up, Bubble.
Yes. If those two guys are playing at a high level, you're going to be in most of these games. And that is, is that fool's gold? Is that just being a very top heavy team? Yeah, probably. But I don't know. You look at the team from 2019 or even before that, 2017 through 2021, and they were pretty top heavy with just the Martian Berger on Pastrnak line, and you let everything fall into place. If you're this team and you're pretty desperate for just points right now, you have to rely on Swayman and Pastrnak to kind of bail you out and let kind of the pieces fall where they may.
Yeah, 100%. And the other part of that is sort of that is how you're built. You didn't go out and add secondary scoring. You didn't go out and give jobs to Fabian Lysell and Georgi Merkulov and Matt Poitras like you said you were going to in the offseason. So you kind of made your own bed, and now you got to lie in it, and you got to get the points. I don't care how you get them, and it's kind of interesting, right? And we're going to talk more big picture stuff, I imagine, after this. But with the way they play, if they get into the playoffs, are you, I don't know, overly worried? Do you look at them and go, they're going to get stomped by a team in 5 games? They could, but I also look at what they have, and I'm like, they might make it interesting for somebody. They might make it interesting for if they were to draw the Capitals. It's like I don't know if that's a blowout kind of series because of these things we're talking about. David Pastrnak, the way he responded in Game 7 a year ago, the way that Swayman played in the playoffs a year ago. So for me, it's kind of like if they get in, I'm not super down on them. I don't know what I'm going to get. But if I get what I've seen these last few games from Swayman, from Pastrnak, throw Marchand in there, I feel a little bit better about what they can potentially do as an upset kind of team. It's just this has to be a constant. These guys we're talking about, Swayman, Pastrnak, Marchand. You want to extend it to Zacha and Coyle? I'm cool with that too. Those guys got to be a constant in your team. They got to bring it every night. They got to play at the top of their game every night, because if you do, you're going to be a better, deeper team. And you are not afforded the luxury of those guys not bringing it right now with the way your roster is built.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I agree. And we'll probably talk about a little bit more in terms of big picture and setting expectations for where this team is, both for right now and if they do make the playoffs. Looking more at the current product on the ice, Cam Neely mentioned the fact that, they call it Matt Poitras. They thought he was going to be with the team kind of the whole year and took a step back, which he clearly, I think, needed some seasoning. But you saw on Tuesday what he can provide this team in terms of his skill and playmaking. Neely also mentioned that, a guy like Fabian Lysell still needs to work on his play away from the puck, which I'm still how about we see what he can do up here, considering that guys already aren't playing the puck and aren't really being responsible in their own end up here with the team right now, sitting comfortable with their NHL contracts. But I don't know what you think, Ty, but were you encouraged by what you saw from Poitras? And do you think that he is a guy that, listen, I don't think this is a thing where we're going to talk about in late March where Poitras is all of a sudden in the top 6. That'd be great if he just exploded and did that. But even if he's on the third line and you're getting more production out of guys like Frederic or Brazeau or Coyle or what have you, were you encouraged by what you saw from Poitras? And would you like to see some more guys join him up here, just in terms of what that spark could be?
Yeah, can I just say that I absolutely hate that quote of you have to outscore your mistakes.
Yes.
I mean, look at this roster. Who's doing that? Who's outscoring their mistakes right now on this roster? They have one guy. Just a real quick look. They have one guy who, in terms of being on the ice, I'm talking forwards here, just because Poitras a forward. They have one forward, or let me check that. Two forwards who have outscored their mistakes by at least 5 goals on the ice. Do you want to know who they are? Pavel Zacha and Cole Koepke. That's it.
Okay, that's not great.
Those are the only 2 guys that have outscored their mistakes by at least 5 goals this year. Marchand's a +1. Geeky's a +1. And this is 5-on-5 on ice scoring. This is not their overall plus-minus.
Yeah.
Kastelik +1. Brazeau +2. And this where it gets funny to me. Georgi Merkulov, 2-1. He's actually a +1. Fabian Lysell, +1. 1-0. Like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? Like, outscore your mistakes. Those guys are. Matthew Poitras was a -2. Whatever. Who cares?
Yeah, no. I do, like, I think you do look at the way that, like, what little rope is afforded to these kind of players like a Merkulov and a Lysell when, again, the product on the actual ice just isn't cutting it in terms of the guys that are already up here. And again, it goes back to what we said. Like, if this team is going to be in a situation where, this season is either a lost cause or one where the expectation should be set low, where if you make the playoffs, great, and you see just kind of what happens. I don't think anyone's expecting this team to be playing into late May, early June. It would be great, but I don't think it's realistic to go in with any of those sorts of views. I'd rather see what these guys can do up here. And listen, if they do suck and are a black hole defensively, one, will it be that much different from what we've seen up here in terms of guys not being careful with the puck, making dumb mistakes? And two, if they are that bad and it really is a complete detriment to the team, well, now you know, and we don't have to keep on talking about this. I'd rather just not have to talk about this. I'd rather go into next year knowing that, like, a guy like Merkulov and Lysell are either not in the picture or are comfortable in terms of, like, oh, that guy is not another one that we go in early September and Sweeney or whoever's running the show here doesn't have to talk about them as being he could fit in here. Let's get the clarity and figure out what these guys can do. Because, again, you saw what Poitras is not a finished product by any means. That guy is still probably going to get rocked. He's still going to get outmuscled along the boards. But you saw what he can do when he has the puck on his stick and a little bit of space. And that's not going to happen every single game. But when you're this desperate and the team has to work so hard to generate any sort of offense, a guy like Poitras can make the difference. And his play alone got you rolling in that game and set the tone for what was a 4-0 lead out of the gate.
Yeah, and sorry about that. My mic got unplugged there for a moment. What I feel is that, I look at that team and I look at the outscoring their mistakes, and it's like, well, nobody's doing that, so you can't cling to that anymore. Especially when you have, like, the 5th worst goal differential in the NHL or whatever it's been this year. That's no longer a viable excuse, especially I think with the way the game is trending. And then you look at the guys that they've committed significant minutes to over the span here. Max Jones was outscored, I think, 5-1. Riley Tufte was, I think, 0-3. Tyler Johnson broke even. Wallstrom's a -1. So it's like, okay, well then apply that metric to everybody, not just your younger players. Like if you're going to sit here and tell me that guys going to be responsible, then that's going to apply to everybody. They can't just apply to just guys who are under 23 years old. That's not fair. That's not how that works. And that just shows, I think, a lack of understanding of where the game is trending. That's a great motto for 1998 Pat Burns and the Bruins to have. It's not the great motto for 2025 NHL standards. It's just not. Watch, I've said this before in this podcast, I know. Last night I watched Edmonton, Colorado. Mistakes galore. Galore. Every shift, 2 mistakes. But it was an electric game with high-end, high-skilled players making high-skill plays. Like, that's what it is. That's the game now. The game is high risk, high reward. And if you don't want to accept that, that's fine, but you're going to get left in the dust. That is just how I feel about that. And you're going to have a certain ceiling that's on your team every year. I would rather not be the Ken Hitchcock Blues, who were great. They allowed 15 shots a game. but every postseason they maxed out in the second or the third round. I would not want to be the Barry Trotz Islanders, who suffocated teams but lost in the second or third round every year. Like, you got to embrace the high-end skill. You got to embrace the mistakes. And especially when your NHL roster, like we've said, they're making those same mistakes. So I say release them, let them go, figure it out. And your base, Connor, should be strong enough when you go out and you sign Lindholm and you have Charlie McAvoy and Nikita Zadorov, Brandon Carlo, Brad Marchand, one of the best two-way wings in hockey, Charlie Coyle, who got some Selke love a year ago. You should have a strong enough base where you can bring in guys that are not good with the puck, perhaps responsibility-wise, and bring them along in a way that doesn't sink your entire team. And if you can't do that, you built a bad team.
Yep. No, exactly. And I do think right now when this team, again, points are at a premium, you need to get some sort of spot, get going here. Bring up the kids, see what they can do. Ty, before we continue to talk about this team and what the next steps are for them, especially going into a critical game on Saturday against the Ottawa Senators, take a quick break, hear from our good friends over at Prize Picks. It's playoff time, and it's now or never. Don't miss out on the last few weeks of football action with Prize Picks, the best place to win cash while watching the playoffs. You just need to pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash as you run your game all season long on America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play just $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off? Which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. Prize Picks now offers MasterCard for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. Prize Picks also invented the Flex Play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can still double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. There's no shortage of ways to participate in Prize Picks, especially during football season. This week on Prize Picks, I'm looking at the football board and selecting Jared Goff for more than 230 passing yards and Saquon Barkley for more than one touchdown. Hopefully he actually scores one instead of just sitting down like he did and costing a lot of people money like the
Scam.
It was not great. It was not great, Saquon. You're hurting us. Listen, it really is, though, that easy to go through the football board and make picks like that. So cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this football season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS on the Prize Picks app to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Shout out once again to our good friends over at Prize Picks. Ty, when you look at the Bruins right now, and yes, it's all well and good. They've won 2 in a row. They have not completely bottomed out. The issue is, and this is what I think we've mentioned since November when this team was really struggling, and the message in the locker room was, oh, we're fine. We still have time. Don't worry about it. It is not looking great right now when you look at the number of teams behind them in the standings who are, 1, playing really well, and 2, still have a lot of games in hand. Thursday, the Bruins did not play, and it was probably about as disastrous as you could want in terms of every team behind you winning. Like every single team, like Columbus won again. Ottawa, they get a point, played a pretty tough game against the Capitals. Montreal wins, Detroit wins, Rangers win. So as of right now, the Bruins are in the second spot in the wild card, 49 points. And right behind them, Ottawa and Montreal both have 48, both with 2 games in hand. Not great, to say the least.
Yeah, that was wild. Watching the games last night, on Thursday night, watching all the results and going, wow, that's not what you wanted. Pretty much across the board. This is going to be a dogfight. And I thought it was really telling. I'm not one of these, I don't love obsessing over the numbers and the projections because it's so hard this time of year. A team can go lose 5 in a row. The hottest team in the league, like the Bruins were entering the Christmas break and then come out playing like absolute crap. But I couldn't believe that. Playoffstatus.com, which I use to kind of track your playoff odds and whatnot, playoff status has the Bruins with a 62% chance of missing the playoffs.
Ooh,
that's not great. That's not great.
no.
And that was before the games last night. It's probably gone down, this morning. But and Money Puck has them at 53%. As of 3 weeks ago, it was 80%. So they are entering coin flip territory, which is terrifying for the Bruins because that's, the coin flips haven't gone their way historically. When they've been that kind of team, they have not made the playoffs more often than not. And so, listen, there's a lot of time between now and game 82. Ottawa could fall off face of the earth. Columbus could as well. Montreal probably will, honestly. Like, you look at some of these rosters, and it's hard to imagine them playing 800 hockey forever. But this really makes every point incredibly valuable here in January for the Bruins. I think if only because, as you mentioned, they got like 5 teams chasing them right now. It's not like, oh, you got to worry about this one team. It's like, no, that's like 5 of them. So you need 5 teams to drop off face of the earth. It's probably not going to happen, honestly.
Yeah, and again, you look at the number of teams that are in this mix, and as you said, maybe Montreal doesn't have the metal or just the bodies right now to keep on that run, but you look at Columbus, again, I don't know how that team is on a run. Listen, they are a feel-good story, and it's great to see them making this push. A lot of firepower on that team, but you look at Ottawa, they've stayed in the mix. They haven't bottomed out, even though Linus Ullmark's been out. And let's not forget, when he was playing, he was arguably the best goalie in the NHL for 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. So they're still kind of staying. Again, they're not on a 7-1-1 run or anything like that, but they're treading water right now without Ullmark in the lineup. So it also means that where the Bruins are playing them a couple of times here in the next couple of weeks, you got to take advantage and put this team away in these matchups, because the last thing you want to do is have it come down to you're in a dogfight with, Swayman and Ullmark needing to both bail out their teams to get a playoff berth here. And then you look further down the lineup, the Bruins, it's frustrating because they were, both in November before Montgomery's firing and then over this extended lull, they had multiple opportunities to really pull away from a lot of these teams. You look at the Rangers, who are playing a little bit better, but still not great, but they're a team that has the talent certainly to go on a run here. You look at Detroit, they've been up and down, but they've been great since their coaching change, and they aren't short on talent. I don't know what exactly Detroit's ceiling is, but they should be a lot better than what they've showed the last 2-ish years, right? So, it's definitely a different spot for the Bruins to be in, whereas it feels like the last couple of years, we knew that they were going to be one of the 3 teams most likely, right, in the Atlantic, and you could kind of sit pretty not worrying about it. I will say I don't hate that the Bruins are looking at navigating through a wild card to get to the playoffs, because I think it opens up more possibilities. It lowers expectations. And I think that's probably the best way to approach if this team does make the playoffs. It's just it should be like the 21 Red Sox, where you get the playoffs, you're what the hell? And if something good happens, this is great. If not, well, what are you going to make of it? But there's no guarantee that's what it's going to be. It does, as you said, feel like it's going to be a dogfight every single game moving forward, which maybe that's kind of the kick in the ass this team needs. Again, whether it's the way you played earlier this year, the inability to separate yourself from so many of these teams, you kind of reap what you sow, and it means this team pretty much has to be dialed in from now until April, if they want to even make the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think as relates to their plans, the deadline, and what they could or couldn't do, or shouldn't do, I think that they're kind of like a gambler that you have to pull away from the table. You tried. You went all in for basically 7 years in a row. I think beginning in 2018 through 2024, you made some variation of a move that indicates that you were win now. Didn't play out that way. Again, there are different degrees of going all in and buying for this team. We all agree. I think their heights were in 2018 and then 2023. Those were all right, you're making your moves. It didn't work. And now you gotta be pulled away from the table, and you gotta say, hey, we tried to hit the jackpot. We didn't hit it. We gotta walk away. I think that's kind of where they are right now, because you can't, you're in my opinion, you're chasing more losses. You're chasing your losses now instead of doing what's probably best for your franchise and your organization. And so I hope they walk away. I hope they sell. I hope that they realize some of the assets that they could bring in if they were to sell. We've talked about some deadlines and stuff in the past with other teams. Look at the 2-year break from buying that the Washington Capitals took. Look at 2023, where they traded Rasmus Sandin, they traded Orlov and Hathaway, as we know. They traded Marcus Johansson. And then down the road, I think they traded, I don't know if it was that deadline or the next one, they traded Lars Eller. I think it was 23. They traded Lars Eller.
I think it was Lars Eller. Yeah.
So they trade 4 players. They got, I think 10 picks for those 4 players. Awesome. They got 2 first-round picks, in fact, along the way. Then last year, they trade Joel Edmondson, I believe it was, right? They trade Joel Edmondson, and they trade another player. I can't remember who exactly right now. It's Anthony Mantha. They trade Anthony Mantha, and they get another 5 picks, I want to say. 4 or 5 picks. In a 2 deadline span, you got 14 draft picks, essentially. There's value there. There's value there in realizing, hey, we could make it, but we're not going to win it unless something crazy happens. So let's do what's best for the organization. Let's sell, and let's get back to the drawing board. And now look at them. Now they're a good team again, and they have an arsenal of draft picks they've either used or will use or can use for trades. That's huge. That's huge. And I think if you're the Bruins, anybody who's not bolted down, I think you got to take calls on. You got to see what you can do. If Anthony Mantha could fetch a second and a fourth in a market that's short on buyers or sellers, rather, Justin Brazeau could get you something better than what you paid to bring him in, which was an NHL contract. Right. It's economics, and I feel like the Bruins have to accept the economics of their situation.
Yeah, no, exactly. I do think you look at this team and where they are. There are going to be some hard decisions that have to be made in the next couple of weeks, and we'll dive a little bit more into what Cam Neely said on Wednesday. Before we do that, let's take another quick break, Ty. Here from our friends over at Game Time Tickets. The holiday season has come and gone, but rejoice, sports fans, because the NFL playoffs are here. And yes, the 2024 Patriots are not playing until late January. No, it has not gone according to plan. But if you want to grab seats to any other NFL playoff game this winter, or even catch the Bruins or Celtics at the Garden, got to go with Game Time Tickets. Game Time Tickets will get you the best seats at the best prices to get to the games, whether it be at the Garden, it be at Fenway a little bit later on this year, what have you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee, Game Time Ticket takes the guesswork out of buying NFL, NBA, and NHL tickets. The Patriots might be done, but do you want to catch the Bruins against the Avalanche in January? How about the Celtics against Ime Udoka and the Rockets? Game Time Tickets has you covered. Game Time Tickets app makes it easier to sort through which specific game, concert, or other event you want to attend, and shows you the best spots available to take in the action. Game Time has a feature called Game Time Picks, which makes getting tickets easier to see your favorite teams play live. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time Tickets also has you covered the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry, including event cancellation protection, 24-hour return guarantee, job loss assurance, and on-time ticket delivery. So what are you waiting for? Take the guesswork out of buying football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Shout out once again to our friends over at Game Time Tickets. Ty, as you said, you look at where this team is and what probably is the most realistic path for this team in terms of knowing when to punt, knowing when to wave the white flag, and look at the long-term success of this team. What did you make of Cam Neely's comments and his admission? Again, I think the one thing that Cam Neely has been when he talks to media is pretty candid, sometimes to a fault, sometimes it gets him and the Bruins in trouble. But what did you take from him admitting that this team has to realistically look at 2 paths at the deadline?
Yeah, real quick, I just want to make a quick correction. The Capitals acquired Rasmus Sandin and then trade him.
Oh, okay.
I had my Eric Gustafsson has played for every team in the league, so I got my wires crossed.
Except the Bruins,
yes. But basically, to recap it real quick, I wanted to look it up. The 2023 Capitals, for trading Marcus Johansson, Lars Eller, Orlov, and Hathaway, and Gustafsson, acquired 2 firsts, 2 thirds, 2 seconds, and Rasmus Sandin, who's become a big factor for their defense. In 2024, they traded 3 players, Joel Edmondson, Anthony Mantha, and Evgeny Kuznetsov, and they acquired a second, a fourth, 2 thirds, and a 5th round draft pick. That is insane GMing right there. And then they spun and they picked up Logan Thompson, Chikrin, and Andrew Mangiapane for some collection of those draft picks. Like that is such that is such a quick turnaround for a team using assets that you acquired. So anyways, yes, going back to Cam Neely. Yeah, he's been super forthright. And you know what? I like that. I like that better than the GM speak of, just the unknown of like we saying something but saying nothing, which is what Don Sweeney has sort of mastered. I give him credit. It's part of his job. But Don Sweeney will speak for 22 minutes and there'll be maybe 4 quotes that you can actually use in those 22 minutes. So Neely is always the truth guy. It's like you have the Hulk and then you have the Hulk Buster. It's like Cam Neely's kind of like he's that version. I agree. I think that it's him. What I liked about those comments, Connor, was that he acknowledged that their internal math may have been wrong. Like acknowledging that, the roster that we built is probably not the best. Right. And I think that is what I find most, I don't know, I would say acceptable. Right. Because it's like, I was sitting there going, do they think they built a good team? Like when they fired Jim Montgomery and we were watching that team, I think 2 things can be true at once. We can acknowledge the roster was bad, but also the coach wasn't getting the most out of said roster. But now you're seeing some of the same problems with Joe Sacco. It's like, it's the roster, man. You don't have enough scoring and speed. Like you don't have enough skill. And it's nice to finally get some admission of that. But what do you do to get out of it? Right. And that I think is the big question. I'm going to ask you, do you think they sell? Because for me, this is, I don't believe it until I see it. I don't see it happening.
Yeah, I don't. I can't see it. I agree with you. I like that they acknowledge that has to be a tangible scenario. And I think I liked that they admitted like, hey, like we might have overvalued the guys we already had. And he said like they went into this year not expecting a lot of guys. I think he said hit their high side to either continue to do that or build off of it. Like, I don't think they were like, well, Zacha had 60 points, so hell, he could have 75 if he's with Lindholm and Pasternak for a year. Like, and if you did go in thinking that was pretty short-sighted and pretty dumb if you're that case. So I like that they admitted that. It's not like, well, no, like we still think this team can, like, if you're going to be delusional about it, that's when, or you just want to believe what your projections were in September or July when you're building this team, that's when you run into trouble. If you put the blinders on, all of a sudden you trudge forward and you're 2 years into a team that is now just a fringe playoff team with no future. That's not great. So I do like that they accepted that this team has faults, that maybe they did not have the right mindset. But it's one thing to also say, like, yeah, we might have to retool a little bit. Another thing to do it. Like, it's one thing to, and I think from their perspective, right, like it's, you have the optics of either missing the playoffs or adopting the label as a seller and what that does for Sweeney and Neely and their jobs, right? That is probably the most striking thing in terms of why they don't want to admit that. And also it comes down to, this is a team that they still thought, even if they thought it was a flawed roster, they'd have to address and add another scorer down the road, what have you. There's still a team that they thought going into the year was poised to build off of what they did the previous season. And maybe, Neely admitting that negates some of that, but this is still a team that it's probably tempting. They got the little green goblin mask being like, just get another 20-goal scorer, like just two seconds in Potter, 2 seconds in Lysell, and like all of a sudden, like you look at the math. If like Swayman was what he is now, I'm not going to do a creepy Willem Dafoe voice, so that's why I'm not going to do that. But
really, I love walking in a room just going misery, misery.
Yes, I'm not. I was going to do him when he's screaming at the boardroom, but. That's them crunching the numbers when it comes to like Potter and those guys. But I could see them looking at this team being like, we're just one 20-goal guy away. And if we can get a guy for a couple of seconds and maybe some guys down in Providence, we can get this thing really cooking, really firing off here. Because again, like it's why it's so frustrating. You look at this team because as up and down as they've been, if this team had like Swayman, what he is now back in October, November, if this team had a power play that was 18th in the league, not
just
saying
functional.
like they're functional. Yeah, if you had a lot of guys that were playing league average, whether that's Swayman before the year or the power play being league average, you're probably like second in the Atlantic right now. So again, that maybe is just the Green Goblin mask telling you what you want to hear and putting, delusions of grandeur into where this team is. But again, it comes down to the most realistic or the best path for this team probably is to do what the Capitals did, because again, if you trade off guys, get draft picks, and you hit on a few guys this offseason, you can right the ship pretty quickly. You still have a 60 goal scorer, a top pair defenseman, two of them, honestly, regardless of how you want to view Lindholm in the long term, but him and McAvoy, you've got foundational pieces there on your blue line, and you've got Jeremy Swayman. You still have foundations in place to build a team pretty quickly if you are going to do a retool. It's just, is the appetite there? And I think that is the biggest thing. And even if it's there, it's one thing to, on January 1st, say you're going to run 4 miles a day and no sugar, you're cutting out those things. And another thing, once you get to, crunch time, when it's the middle of January, it's still dark out at 4 p.m., you want to order Domino's. And you don't want to do it's one thing to say it and all the right things, another thing to actually carry it out when the going gets tough and it's gut punch time and you're the Bruins and this team could, middle of February still be up 3 points in the standings. But if a team's calling, you'd be like, hey, Frederick, that is the thing where what is the right call and what is going to be the short-term gains. And this team has to kind of grapple with that, because I think we know what the right move is, but that's where you're at.
Right. Yeah. The sweet siren song of the cheesy bread.
Of course.
With a side of garlic sauce.
Yes.
And here's a little trivia for you, because when's the last time the Bruins sold? Can you remember off the top of your head when the last time they sold was?
Jesus. 15 in the off season.
So in season 2007. Yeah. 2007 was the last time they did that. They traded Brad Stewart to Calgary for Andrew Ferentz and Chuck Kobasu. It's been almost 20 years since they've done that. The closest thing that we've had to that, to your point, in season, is 2018 when they traded Frank Petrano for a third-round pick, which they then immediately flipped to acquire Nick Holden. So it wasn't even a sell. It was a lateral sell because they wanted to bring in a different kind of player. So they haven't done this, and so that's why I think that I don't believe it until I see it. They are not a team that sells historically. They just simply don't do it. But here's where it gets interesting, right? Charlie Jacobs also spoke during this gala, and he said, "I don't measure success by making the playoffs. I measure it by championships." Okay. Well, then allow your front office to do what's best to get you closer to a championship this year, which is not simply making the playoffs. It's selling off guys that are not part of your long-term plans. And if you allow them to do that, you will get closer to what your ultimate goal is. But if you do that and then you don't make the playoffs and then you fire the GM, you fire the president, well, then you're a liar. You're a liar and you just want to make the playoffs. And I think that's where things get kind of interesting here, is that the Bruins, in theory now, because Charlie Jacobs said that, almost have the blessing to make moves that get them closer to being a contender faster, which this year, I hate to say it, is selling off guys that are not part of your future and just acquiring assets to either draft or flip in a trade for something in the offseason, like the Capitals did. That is what they got to do. It's just, do they have the actual authority, the blessing, the guts, really, to do all that?
Yeah. Yep. We will see in terms of what exactly the Bruins' appetite is for a retool rebuild moving forward.
What do you think retool means, by the way, real quick? What do you think that means? Do you think that means hockey trade? Like you trade a guy who you trade a pending UFA for a guy who's maybe not great but has term, or is a pending RFA? Like what would that mean, retool, in your opinion?
I mean, I think it's probably moving assets that aren't here for the long haul for picks and getting somewhat sort of a clean slate in terms of next year, right? In terms of the offseason of, if you're moving guys, you bring in new blood, get draft picks, you're able to keep your first round pick this year and just bring in someone. Like right now, if you're a team that either is on the fringe or what have you, and these teams are so jumbled together, the standings, you could all of a sudden have like the 12th, 13th, 14th pick, like just off of just missing the playoffs. These teams are so jumbled together. So if like this team goes out there and all of a sudden there's a guy that, again, I just want like a player that you look at their stats and you're like, that guy is automatically the top of our prospect pipeline. I want some dude from the WHL who maybe he's got to work on his defensive game a little bit, but he's got 53 goals in 60 something games in WHL. But like they need just pure skill. So if you're able to keep your first, move guys that you don't think are here for the long haul, maybe it opens the door for a hockey trade or something like that. But I think it's resetting a little bit and giving yourself the opportunity to be bold this offseason in terms of keeping your prospect pipeline in place, building more, adding more assets there, while also giving the ability where you still have these foundational pieces to build off of that going forward. I think that's how I view the retool.
Yeah, I look at it like you're moving off some guys that have term, right? And you're resetting the deck in terms of like your cap space moving forward. Maybe that is a Charlie Coyle, maybe that is an Andrew Peak, a Brandon Carlo, perhaps. Like, and you're making more of a hockey trade, but you're trying to get maybe a sliver more of cap space, or just address a position that you think is a long-term need, like second line right wing. Maybe there's a winger out there who has some term left that the Bruins say, you know what, if we package this guy and this guy, we bring this guy in, it's like, yeah, it's going to hurt in 2024, but we're going to solidify a spot that we need to solidify for a long time. So that's how I look at, like, I don't know. Like, I think the seismic sort of shift that people want, A, if it happens, it's not going to happen at the deadline. And B, I don't know if they're there yet. I don't know if they're there, like full on culture shakeup. We're going to trade a McAvoy or a Pasternak. Like, I don't see them doing that. And if they do, it's not going to be until the summer. But again, I don't see that kind of trade happening. I think retool might be guys that are solid players for them, but they have term and their value may never be higher than it is right now in terms of trading them, because you're giving a win now team an extended rental, a year and a half long rental, so to speak. And so that might be where that leads, but I don't know, because again, they've never done this in our time covering the team. They've never done this in our time, even being a fan of the team. They've rarely done this predating our writing days. So it's a really weird spot for them. I think you're going to get something kind of I have no idea. I think they have an appetite for a hockey trade, but I think they're cognizant of trading picks because they realize they need picks, not to jettison even more of them.
Yeah, and I think even like, again, in terms of the appetite, and I'll just leave it at this, like in terms of the team being hesitant for an appetite, I think the appetite is there for the Bruins fan base that, again, if you go in with a purpose and all of a sudden you're back next year with a new cast of players, still, again, your floor is still like, you should be in the mix. At your worst, you should be in the mix every year. Maybe that means you're still like a 93-point team a year if it goes haywire like this year. But if you're able to bring in new blood, bring in younger players that offer up hope of what they could be in another couple of years, and you can follow, maybe not to the T to what the Capitals have done, but be bold, bring in new faces and seeing what they can provide, then again, like the hardest part is out of the way in terms of your foundational talent. Not every team has a 60-goal scorer. Not every team has a 26-year-old goalie that, when he's on, can win you a round or two or three. Not every team has guys like McAvoy or Lindholm anchoring your decor. So I think the appetite is there if this team is smart with what they do and they go in with a purpose and a unified front on this offseason. Because, again, like you can, even if you like still have a few pieces, you could still friggin' make the playoffs as like a wild card team. If other teams fall off and Swayman goes on a heater, and then you're playing with house money of like you're still in kind of retooling on the fly going into next year while starting that kind of those growing pains now. And if your growing pains is you still make the playoffs, you make things exciting, you see what you do in the first round, and if you're out, well, you at least have a jumping off point for the offseason, you do it. So I do think the fans would endorse that. It just comes down to whether the team wants to bite the bullet, accept that, the optics maybe aren't that great for what they are, for what they're doing. But I think a lot of Bruins fans who see the writing on the wall and see that as much as it sucks that it might have to take the label of a seller or a retool, the hard part is out of the way in terms of the franchise fixtures you have there. Like now it's all about getting creative and being bold to help what you already have. Because again, Red Wings are a team, Sabres, even like the Montreal Canadiens, where they've got a lot of talent. Lane Hutson's great. They don't have a 60-goal scorer, They don't have a number one goalie. Like, there's a lot of teams that even if you look at them being like, damn, these teams are going to be on the up and up, they don't have the foundational franchise fixtures that you have. So it's all about the Bruins and the front office committing, I think, to those to that retool, if that's what ends up being.
Yeah, I agree. And for me, it's just you got to have the stomach for it, and you got to have the blessing, I think, from above that, hey, I know you're not going to like this, but this is what's best for the franchise. And until we see it, given the green light, I have a hard time believing it's going to happen. It's just how I feel. Like Sweeney has never been a selling GM. I don't think he likes doing it. I don't think the front office likes doing it. And, I think it goes back to the idea that, until proven otherwise, playoffs are how you keep your job in this town, in that office. And so if they feel that way, regardless of what the CEO of the team says, like they might act like, oh, I got to make the playoffs or I'm going to get fired. So we'll see what happens there. And the other thing too is I'm not sure what his status is, but keep in mind that this is now, I believe, the third season of Don Sweeney's new contract, his latest contract with the team. I can't imagine he got more than a 4-year deal. So I don't think he's a lame duck. But I wonder if we're entering the final year of that contract, and if that allows him to maybe have a bit more freedom, because hey, I'm not a lame duck guy. I'm not coaching. I'm not GMing for my job, but I have a year to do this and then to bring in high-end talent before I'm up for a new deal. So I wonder what happens there, and if that plays a potential factor for the Bruins and Sweeney specifically.
Yeah, we will see what happens. We'll see what the moves the Bruins end up making. First up is that game on Saturday against the Senators, which if the Bruins lose, they will be out of the playoff picture, which maybe that accelerates what the Bruins end up deciding to do in the coming months. Ty, before we let you go, where can we read your stuff? Where can we hear you on the airwaves? All that good stuff.
Yeah, you can find me on the Sports Hub, the Shaw's and Star Market Hockey Show every Saturday morning from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. We'll be there tomorrow. I'll be riding solo, so please call in. 617-779-0985. So I'll be on there from 9 to 11 tomorrow. You can also find me on 985thesportshub.com and on social media @_Ty Anderson. So we'll have you covered every step of the way there as the Bruins try to continue their little mini streak here, make it 3 on Saturday. How about yourself?
Yes, you can read my stuff over at Boston.com and the Boston Globe. We've covered every step of the way this Bruins season with recaps, features, columns, breakdowns, all that good stuff, especially if this team does decide to retool on the fly here a little bit this year. You can also find me on Twitter, X, whatever it's called, @Conor Ryan _93. Fans, this is Poke the Bear episode 296. You have a great rest of your week.